All right, so here's how I installed this on my 2015 JK. Let's start over here with the power supply. Okay, we'll start with the main power cable. Now what I did was I came off the battery right here, and this is a 2-gauge cable. Of course, I made my own crimps, and that comes to the breaker right here. It comes out the breaker down here and comes out this wire right here, and I just ran it and looped it around. It's pretty thick stuff, and it goes around here. This is it right here. Of course, I wrapped it in wire loom, as you can see. Ran it behind here, zip tied it along the main wire harness right there, and then brought it to the other side. We'll get to that other side in just a minute. As far as this breaker goes though, I used right there, you can see a self-tapping screw head, and I put one over here as well. And so there's 2 self-tapping screws that hold this breaker against this piece of plastic right here. So there's a piece of plastic right here. If you get in your JK, you can see that. And you can feel behind here also, just make sure there's no wires or anything that your self-tapping screws are going to hit. Of course, you can put a bolt and a nut, or a bolt through and put a nut on the back, but these self-tapping screws seem to do a good job for me. So now the main power supply wire comes around right here, and I wrap it around down here under the horn and underneath this, and I brought it up right here. Let me bring this over here. I brought it up right here through the bottom of the fuse box thing there, and there's the connection right there. Okay, and as far as the ground goes, I didn't use the 2-gauge. I used the ground cable that came with the Auxbeam, and I just cut it and shortened it and put a new crimp on the end. It just goes from right here, it goes out. It's kind of hard to see because it's underneath these other 2 wires here, but it goes out the bottom just like this one, wraps around, comes up right here, and it comes up to this little stud right here. And this little stud, I just took this nut off. You can see I've ground a couple things here. Just made sure all the paint was cleaned off of the stud, off this washer that's on the inside of this stud that's fixed. And then also on the back side, on the inside of this nut here, made sure that was all clean and nice and shiny. And that's working good as a ground. Now while we're over here, we'll go ahead and talk about the fuse box. You may have noticed that I've cut off a lot of this plastic, this little plastic shroud that used to live here. I've cut this off. Okay, looks like I brushed up against that, but thankfully the vibratory cutter didn't cut it. And there's the piece we're taking off. Cool. Now I should be able to drop this bracket down here like this-ish. I took the nut off this. This looks like just a grounding bolt, kind of like this one is. There's a couple grounds right there. And so I thought, well, I'll just use this as my ground, but I think I'll just ground my Auxbeam control box right here. And then we'll use this as one of the mounting points for the bracket. And then I just drilled another hole right here and then went ahead and tapped it with the self-tapping screw. And then we'll just use that for the other mounting point. This will be a nice solid one right here. Now in this case, I'm not using these slots. I'm going to use the actual holes. Okay, and hopefully this comes out in the camera, but there's my self-tapping screw right there that holds this side of the bracket in. And I ran my inspection camera inside here from a couple different places to make sure there was no wires or anything inside this part of the fender right here. And there's nothing, at least on my JK, there's nothing inside here. You can see where I mounted the actual fuse box. You have several places you can mount it. I mounted it as far inboard as I could here because I was worried about the curve of the Jeep hood here, and I wanted to get as far in as I could. But also then you have to be careful of this right here, these lines right here, and you can see that they're cleared everywhere as far as the frame of this goes, so they don't touch at all. The next part we'll talk about is this next cable right here, and this is the cable that tells the unit here that the key is on. Okay, so this little wire is just a single wire, and I put it in a wire loom here, ran it around here, ran it up alongside the main 2-gauge power cable right here, and you can see that's it right there, and it just runs over there in wire loom. Let's go over there and look at that. Okay, so that little wire comes around behind the engine compartment, again zip tied to the harness here, runs along here and right here, and I brought it up right through underneath this beside the lug, and I had to cut a little slot right there and that in order to get the, because they made it pretty airtight and pretty watertight, so that's pretty good. that they did that, but this gets pinched pretty bad still, so I need to either notch it here or notch it a little deeper there so it doesn't pinch it quite as bad. It comes up to a fuse tap right here, and there's the fuses. That's a 5 and a 20. And then the one I used here was M6. M6 is labeled right here. It says 20 amp power outlet #1 accessory. Okay, and then if you look on the schematic here, you can see that M6 is the second one over right here at the kind of the inboard rear. Okay, and that's that second one right there. Not that white one, but that one between the white one and the red one. Cool. And so the 20 amp was the factory one, and then the 5 amp, of course, is all it takes for the Auxbeam. And we'll just plug that in right there. Perfect. So when you turn your key on, that sends current to this right here. And so that tells the fuse box to allow current to flow from the main power supply, which is always hot right here, through these fuses to your output wires. But it also powers your switch control inside the cab. And that's the next one we're going to talk about, this cable right here. And then of course this runs out of here, comes down here. I have it running up underneath here, up underneath the horn, and then right up underneath here, you can see it right there. It's in wire loom, and it goes through a little circle of rubber. And that circle of rubber, I just cut an X in, and then I passed the wire right through that, and it kind of sealed up around it, and it did a pretty good job. So that's right on the outside of the brake booster here, and just inside the firewall. Okay, and now it's going inside the cab. Let's go look in there. Okay, now we're inside the Jeep. Let's get underneath here. And this is my least favorite part of doing anything on vehicles, is getting underneath. Okay, so you can see right there, that's the piece of rubber that I split, and that's where the wire comes through. Now the wire's pretty long, and I don't feel comfortable with shortening that, so I just kind of coiled it up in wire loom and zip tied it there to take up the extra slack. And then the rest of it comes around here and kind of goes up here between the console and the not the firewall, but the fender. And let's go over here and I'll show you how I did that. Okay, so basically then the wire comes up right along the inside of here. I'll show you the details of how I did this, but let me just show you basically where I ran it. And then up here through the A-pillar, across the top, and you can kind of see where the wire comes out right there, and then goes to the control panel. And then there's a couple screws right here that hold it, that I screwed it in to the top there, and that seems to work really well. I like it right there. Both the driver and the passenger can get to it real easily from there. Okay, in this little panel, if you look carefully, there's a gap right around here. And so the easiest thing I found to do is just kind of hook your finger underneath here, back here, and just start pulling it apart. And then just keep your fingers inside and work your fingers up, and it'll snap straight out. And I'll show you those connectors here in just a second. Okay, so that's all those connectors are. They're just little clips. And there's little clip holes. Okay, there's a few of them there. And the wire comes up right here then, and you can see it right here, and goes up behind this little A-pillar cover. Okay, and as far as this goes, there's two holes here, but you only need to mess with one. This one's a Phillips, okay? Okay, and that's what you're after there. You just pull the Phillips screw out, use some needle nose pliers, and pop it out. Now the upper one just has a bolt in it, but it doesn't attach any of these pieces of plastic, so just leave that one alone. Okay, next we're going to loosen this part, just to give yourself some clearance over this. And then we're going to take this other screw out right here. There's two screws here that hold this in place. Now as far as this piece goes right here, I just grab it from right out here, kind of along the edge, and pull it straight down. And it'll take some force pulling it straight down, but it will pull out, and it basically just has this plastic tab right here that goes up in that hole right there. Okay, that's all that holds that on. You can disconnect this if you want to get it out of the way, but I didn't find that was necessary. Then as far as this remainder piece right here for the A-pillar goes, just pull it straight back toward you, and there's the clip. That clip goes in that slot right there. Has another alignment pin that you have to get aligned. Okay, and last piece is this one right here. And try to work your fingers up inside here. And the clips, you want to kind of pull back toward you a little bit and down. Okay, and there's a couple clips right up inside there. There's one that goes up in those slots. And there's also another alignment pin right there. that's sticking up, and you can see the hole it goes in right there, okay? So that's all I did. You can see there's my wire that goes up right here. Now I took this down because I was going to put self-tapping screws up through here. So these two screws that hold my bracket in place right there, and right there, I wanted to make sure there was no wiring that it was going to chafe later. So I don't feel anything up here on mine. The only wire I have to worry about is my Auxbeam wire that runs across right here. This other wire that runs along here is captured along the kind of this far side of this panel. So my screws are far away from that. Okay, good. All right, so that's how it comes apart. Going back together is pretty much the opposite. So first thing, we're gonna try to align this hole over here. Okay, we'll kind of get it up inside. See if we can engage those clips. And I'm gonna kind of push forward. Okay, that's good. We'll get our wires down so they're not quite getting pinched right there. Okay, now this A-pillar piece, when you go to put it back in, make sure it kind of engages down there like it came out. And the easiest thing to do is look over here and make sure that that little pin right there, that little plastic pin, goes into the hole right there. And you might not be able to see it in the camera, but I can see it. And then I know that the rest of that's aligned. And that'll hold that in place. Then we'll bring this one around, and that white pin, just make sure you get it lined up in the hole right up there. Okay. Now if your wire gets caught up, you know, laying across here, this won't go up into place. So make sure your wire, when it comes across here, goes back here and isn't overlying this part right here, because there's a lot of plastic that has to contact the metal right here. We'll just drop this back in right here. And now this piece has some little flanges there. Make sure they go back beyond. And then once that's back behind the metal there, just line up your slots for your click, 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 click. Voila. Okay, then just don't forget to put your visor back in place. And click your roof back in, because you don't want to lose that next time you're driving down the road. So yeah, I'm thinking about moving it to another position, but let me show you why I'm thinking that. So once I use this M6 position, I was really happy because I dropped the fuse tap in here and it's working well. And the first click of my key powers all my lights on my roof rack and all over my Jeep. So that's sweet, it's working good. But I got to thinking about it, and so the reason I'm not happy with this is because of the way these fuse taps work. And here's how they work. First thing you have to keep in mind is I'm going to take the fuse tap out and just set it to the side here. These slots where the fuses go, you know, both sides don't carry power. Only one side has 12 volts, right? So 12 volts comes up one side, goes through the fuse, and goes down the other side and goes to whatever accessory or whatever work that circuit's supposed to do. And so if we're going to see which one has power, we're going to turn this meter here to just DC volts, and we're going to set the ground here, and I'm going to set this in the left side right here, and you can see on the meter there's no voltage, or it's saying 83 millivolts. That's not battery voltage, right? So let's move it over here to this right side, okay? And that's saying 12.33 volts. So that's the battery. This is the hot side on the right over here. Now why that's important is because of the way these are engineered. So they're made to be engineered to where the positive, or the current, the 12 volts, comes through this side, okay? It's supposed to come up this side, go through the existing fuse. Now this is the 20 amp fuse that was on this accessory slot at this M6 position. And so that current's supposed to go across the fuse here and then go back down this pole to the other side, okay? That's how it's engineered. There's a connection directly from here to here to here, and it powers this fuse also. This is the fuse to the Auxbeam, and this tells the Auxbeam that the key is on. And so that's sweet, it's working. And so power comes up through here, goes to this side, goes here, goes across here, and goes down the wire to the Auxbeam, okay? So both circuits work that way. Now, the problem is, if you drop the fuse in like this, the way it works, the positive is actually coming up this side. I can't flip it around because there's no room for the wire like that, okay, unless I cut a hole there, which I could do. But then it's right in the way of the lock position right here. So I don't really want to do that. All right, the reason this still works though in this position where the positive comes up right here is because this fuse is intact, okay? So the positive comes up through here, goes through this fuse, and goes back down this side. But that's also powering this side of this fuse, right? Because this is all connected from here to here to here. And so that allows power to come up through here, go across this 20 amp, back up here and go down this 5 amp. What does that mean? If this fuse blows, this fuse isn't going to work at all, okay? So I'm not as happy with this. I'd rather have it in a different position. All right, we're just using this INNOVA 3320 multimeter. This thing does a lot of things. There's a couple things I really like about it. It's been super reliable. I've had this one for a few years, and this one lives in my Jeep. I keep it in my Jeep all the time. But what I like about it is it just runs on 2 AA batteries. It's still on the original 2 AA batteries from China or wherever this thing was made. But it does run on AA's, which a lot of people have laying around. It's not a proprietary battery, and that's one thing I do like a lot about it. So if you're looking for one, there's a link in the description. Okay, and I've got a couple of these meters, and I like them a lot. So we're just going to double check here that, and we've got it set on ohms right here. Okay, and that's the tone. Of course, that's not just ohms, but that's the tone. So they'll give us a tone. And that tells us we have good continuity, right? So we're going to look at this fuse tap here. We've got the 20 amp fuse and we've got the 5 amp fuse, right? So this 20 amp was, of course, from the accessory. I'm just using this little wire clip here just to hold this together. This wire doesn't really do anything. Okay, so now let's see if this has continuity from here. Okay, it does. And let's see if it has continuity from here. Okay, it does. The current going from here, let's say the positive is coming from the fuse box up through this one, it's going up through here and going up through this fuse, right? And coming down here. And you can even see, we can even test the fuse right there. It's positive there, it's positive there, and it's positive down here on the wire. So that's working well. All right, now it's also, but also the power's coming up through here, like we said, and going through this fuse because this fuse is still intact, and then going over to this side of the fuse and then coming up to this fuse and going down this fuse, okay? So, and that confirms it right there. That's what's working. Not exactly easy to do. I'll try not to break the fuse here, but there we go. Okay, now that the fuse is out, we still should have continuity going this way, right, from here. And we do, but watch now. Nothing. Nothing. Yes, continuity, continuity. So if this fuse opens, right, if it blows, if it opens, current going through here won't get to this fuse. Now, let's say you don't want to use the M6 position. This M14 position, at least on this JK, is open. And so this works well. You don't need, there's no fuse that you even have to put in the fuse tap. You can just drop this fuse tap in place and it'll work perfectly. And you can see the multimeter there. I'm going to put the positive right here in this corner, and you can see there's no voltage, and we'll put it right over here, and you can see there's voltage. So there's 12 volts coming from the battery to this side. That works perfectly for the fuse tap, because that means the positive is going to come right over here, and you can just drop it in just like that, and it's a perfect fit. But your key is on 2 clicks, you know, so it will use a bit more power if you're using that M14 position. But then you don't have to worry about the fuse. So pick your poison. Okay, so how I'm doing this is I've just got the battery connected to these jumper cables. Okay, these are just jumper wires with little clips on them. And of course you can use your car battery if you want, that's fine. This is a DC amp meter that I'm using, and this was off Amazon. I think it was about 30 bucks, but make sure you, if you're gonna do this or get one of these, get the DC amp meter. I'll put the link in the description of the one that I bought. That's this one, and it works well. I've used it several times on my diesel pickup to calculate or to figure out my amp loads for different things on my diesel. I've used it to calculate light amperage as well. So here's how this works. We just turn it on to, now of course straight is DC, the little sine wave there is the AC icon, so they're shared. You can do voltage DC or AC as well. And so we're just going to clip this around the power wire here. And we'll see how many amps it's pulling. And it's pulling 0.8 amps. Okay, so that's not a ton. So we're going to round that up to 1 and just call these 1 amp. Now I have these lights all over my Jeep. You know, there's a bunch on my roof rack. There's some in the back that I've added as well, in the back inside the cab. And of course, these were existing on my Jeep when I bought it, and these are rigids. And so, all, you know, I've got 3 different brands or 4 different brands of lights, I think, in my Jeep now. And so, Rigid Industries. And so I was wondering how many amps these are pulling. And so that wire was already existing, but I did tie it into my Auxbeam fuse box here. So let's just lift this off. And so this is the wire right here that comes out here and goes up to those rigid lights, okay? So we can just clip the amp meter on right here and see how many amps they're pulling. So we'll just come in the Jeep here. We're gonna one click, ta-da, and the radio comes on, sweet. Now up here, I have, these are the upper lights, these are the lower front lights, so we'll turn those on. And we'll come up in the front here and they're both on, okay? Then we'll come over here and there's our circuit, there's our wires that go to those lights. So we'll just take our DC amp meter here and we'll click it over to 60 amps, not 600, because then the scale wouldn't be right. All right, and then we'll clip it on here and hopefully we can do this without wrecking anything. Okay, there it is, 3.7 amps basically. So they're almost 2 amps a piece for both of those lights, or for each of those lights. They're almost 2 amps a piece, so almost 4 amps between the two of them, which is less than the 5 amp fuse. So this is a safe circuit. You know, we're not overloading the circuit. Good. Okay, and this one also runs on easily accessible batteries. These are AAAs, and these are still the original batteries. I think I've had this for 2 years at least, and not using it for everything. This is not my primary multimeter, although it will work for a multimeter. It is nice for that. Of course, it comes with leads, but these AA batteries are easy to change. It even sends a little screwdriver for the little Phillips that holds the panel together. Kind of cool. All right, so I've done this with all these circuits, okay? So on the front lights, that's one circuit. I have all 4 of those lights. I calculated the amperage. I made sure that it was safe, that it was underneath the fuse rating here, that I was putting those 4 lights on. The same thing with the side lights here. There's 2 side lights there that I have on a different switch, and there's 2 side lights there. There's 1 there and 1 there. And then of course, so there's 4 there, and I calculate that as well to make sure that the amperage that all 4 of those lights together were pulling were lower than the fuse rating here, okay? So this thing turned out to be super handy. You know, I feel safe about what I've done. Again, the link is in the description if you're interested in this one. Home Depot may sell DC, I know they sell AC ones, but if you buy one, just make sure it's DC. AutoZone may sell them as well. I don't know, parts stores may sell them as well, but this one's worked really well for me.